Our first presenter is the Director of Prevention for the Saskatchewan Workers Compensation Board. He will be covering the recently updated Fatality and Serious Industry strategy. Jonathan Sherman has worked in health and safety for over 13 years, supporting operations in Saskatchewan and across North America in the construction, mining, manufacturing, and post-secondary industries. He is a Canadian registered safety professional and holds degrees from the University of Saskatchewan. The Prevention Department at WCB is comprised of safety professionals and training experts dedicated to reducing serious injuries and fatalities in Saskatchewan. The Prevention Department also works closely with employers, workers, provincially funded safety associations, and over 50 unique stakeholders from government, nonprofits, and the private sector to work towards Mission Zero. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you so much, Kelly, and thank you to the SCSA for having me here today to present on our new updated Fatality and Serious Injury strategy. You may have seen the launch of this strategy in March by Minister Morgan, and although the strategy was launched in March this year, we have been working on some things in the background already to get ready and to hit the ground running here in 2023. So I'm excited to share some of this with you and answer any questions, and also outline a few potential opportunities both now and in the future for those of you in the construction industry to participate. So I can move over to the next slide. As soon as I figure out how, there we go. So just an outline of what we're going to talk about today. I'll give you a little bit of an overview on the current state of serious injuries within the province. We'll get into a bit of how this strategy was developed, how it was put together, and who we engaged with in order to put a strategy together that we think both meets the needs of the province as well as the unique individual groups that are represented within it. And then for the majority of the presentation, I'll give a little bit of a snippet to what we accomplished in the first strategy, but focus mostly on the new strategy, its focus areas, and some of the work that we've begun and we hope to do in the next 5 years with the reduction of serious injuries and fatalities in the province. Of course, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. I know that the team here at SCSA will bring them either up in front or we'll address them at the end, but I'm happy to have questions, and I'll try to do my best to leave some time at the end of my presentation for that. So the story in Saskatchewan is actually a fairly positive one when it comes to injuries in the workplace. If we look at our numbers from 2023, we compare them to this year, we've seen essentially a reduction of half of the injury rate in the province. This is a great story. This means we've been working toward reducing injuries. Organizations like the SCSA and the other safety associations, the WCB, Labor Relations, Workplace Safety, all the other organizations that focus on these things, and the employers and the employees that work in those organizations, and the companies in construction and other industries are responsible for this. And it is a great story. However, if we take a little closer look at the data, what we do see is that while the total injury rate has been cut in half over the last 10 years, we aren't seeing a similar reduction in serious injuries or fatalities. On average, we see about 35 fatalities in the Saskatchewan workplace each year, and really that has not changed over the last 10 years. When we talk about serious injuries, we do see a bit of an ebb and flow, but really the numbers have stayed pretty consistent between the 24 and 2,300 number again over the last 10 years. Now, why is this something that we want to focus on? Well, obviously, the serious injuries, when we talk about those, we're talking about long durations of claims. So people are out of the workplace for longer than 50 days or more. We're talking about obviously the fatalities and those serious traumatic injuries that leave folks in the hospital, or they have permanent restrictions as a result of that injury. Anything from a loss of limb, or it could be permanent damage to their back or other organs. This also includes psychological claims when we discuss serious injuries. As you have seen from this conference, as well as any other conference or safety organization out there right now, there's a high emphasis on psychological health and safety. There's a few reasons for that. Obviously, there's a lot of suffering and time away from work that is a result of those types of injuries. as well as they are essentially an emerging injury that if we go back 10 years, at least when I think about my own career going back 10 years, psychological health and safety was there, but it wasn't as prevalent in terms of what people were talking about or understanding the impact on our businesses and on our individuals. So we include those because we do see them increasing year over year. There's also a lot of research going on regarding the impact of physical injuries and how they relate to psychological injuries. And definitely there's a connection between when someone does have a serious injury, there's often a component of psychological injury there as well. So it is the forefront of, I think, safety in our generation and what we're going to be focusing on quite a bit, in addition to the physical side of safety that we are more familiar with in our careers. So just to take a quick step, just a quick look at what we accomplished over the first strategy. Now, the first strategy was a little bit different. We already had some things in place, and this was started in 2018. And it was kind of compiling some of the things we were already doing and then looking toward moving forward in other areas. And that strategy essentially ended last year. We wrapped up most of the activities. And the focuses of those areas are along the top there on the screen. You can see asbestos exposure. One of the things we did accomplish was increasing in awareness within the province and in the workplace through different campaigns of the importance of asbestos safety. Motor vehicle crashes, we did see a reduction of 25% of work-related motor vehicle crashes. It's slightly below our target of 30%. Firefighter cancer and controls, we saw a 100% increase in controls. There was quite a bit of work done with different fire departments and groups to make them aware of some of the issues with detoxification of their equipment and cancer that can result from some of those activities. So a good success there. Falls from heights, we were looking for a reduction of 30%, and we saw a reduction of 19%, still working toward that. Healthcare, a reduction of serious injuries by 10% was our goal, and we actually saw an increase. Now, considering the last few years in COVID and the stress that put on the medical practitioners and doctors and nurses and everybody involved in managing COVID, it's still not a positive result, but I think that it's something that we'll continue to work for in the future. And understandable considering the circumstances we were under. And transportation, we were looking for a 10% reduction. We saw 3. And psychological injuries, we were trying to reduce the duration of those injuries, particularly with first responders. We did see some success in reduction. And in some areas, we saw a reduction of greater than 20%. But again, the idea with the claim duration with a psychological claim is if we're reducing the reduction, that means that we're providing treatment and allowing that person to reintegrate into the workplace. So a few things were done to support that, particularly with first responders in the province. And then finally, manufacturing, a reduction of 5%, and we did see a reduction of 8%. So we had some success. And of course, all that success isn't a result of the plan or the work that was done by the WCB or our partners at LRWS, but it does help us track, how are we headed toward those goals in the province. So when it came to the new strategy, one of the things that we wanted to ensure was that we were engaging the communities that were necessary to inform this strategy. So we spent the first part of 2022 meeting with different groups, including Indigenous student groups, different work groups, different government organizations, industries, educators, researchers. We had about 7 separate sessions with over 300 individuals participating in the engagement. And the purpose of that was really to focus where does the community see the need for these, and how does that align with the statistics we're seeing from both the claim side and the injury side, and the information that we're getting from our partners in our safety associations, as well as labor relations, workplace safety. If you're interested to see more of the story of the engagement and some of the comments, I would really encourage you to take a look at the strategy, which is obviously online. And you'll also see some stories there from injured workers that I think really outlines the impact and the need for this type of focus, describes the impact it has on them individually, on their families, and on those that they work with. Though they've gone through terrible workplace injuries, the ability for them to return and recover, I think, is one of the amazing things that is highlighted in there. And that's the story we want to hear going forward. Of course, the goal is always 0 injuries. But when injuries occur, are folks being provided the support they need to recover? And can they recover in a way that brings them back into the workplace and back into contributing and supporting their families? So just to summarize a little bit of some of the things that were brought up by the discussion, we did see that, still seeing the priority and need for support for the healthcare community. It is one of our largest employers in the province and under significant stress, particularly after the COVID pandemic. Leadership support, so that this is something I'm sure many of you are familiar with. If you're going to have success and safety, you need to have leadership support, and that means engagement all along the organization from top to bottom. Leaders need to be seen. They need to be out with their frontline staff and engaging and talking to them about safety. And then, of course, adequate supervision, which is always a difficult one. It comes up with many of our incident investigations, I'm sure, is similar with you. And the concept of if we're having supervision issues, are we providing those supervisors with the resources and the ability and the time to do proper supervision? We tend to put a lot on our supervisors in all industries, and without providing them the opportunity to be successful, it's difficult to see that success. Of course, cultural awareness. Saskatchewan is becoming more and more diverse every day, and that diversity adds richness and ideas and opportunities to all of our organizations. But we need to ensure that we have a better understanding of how those folks are integrating into the workplace, and if there's any particular cultural risks that they may be higher for. We are seeing an increase in serious injuries from groups. We can see in the data when someone is coming to Canada to work, we can see that there is a potentially higher risk for them to have injury. And I don't think that's a surprise to folks when you talk about cultural differences, language barriers, potentially someone who's did something completely different in their home country and comes to Canada and is working in a completely different industry and field. There is a higher risk of them having an injury. Enforcement, again, aligning that enforcement activity. So the Labor Relations Workplace Safety, which is the other side of WorkSafe, Saskatchewan has been doing an extensive amount of work on trying to find and target and readjust and align with where the risks are within the industry and where the serious injuries are occurring, and focusing on those folks and those areas. So when we see the fatality and serious injury strategy, it is, I think, important to emphasize that this is something that comes from the minister, and the minister is essentially the one that we finally report to at WCB as well as LRWS. We are two separate organizations, but we report to the same leader, and that leader represents the people of Saskatchewan. WorkSafe itself, through its mandate, is essentially a brand that identifies that union between labor relations and WCB, and we meet on a regular basis every 2 weeks to discuss things. And when we get into priority employers that I'm sure some of you are familiar with, and some of the enforcement aspects of this plan, we work directly with labor to make that successful. So some of the top causes, we've seen an increase in violence in the workplace, mental health claims, back injuries, motor vehicle accidents, again, continue to be one of our higher risks, both in work and outside of work. And then there are some sector and specific specific areas that are kind of outside of that. Just a comment regarding violence and mental health. The information and the research isn't quite clear if we're seeing a real increase in violence in the workplace, or we're seeing an increase in reporting of claims as a result of violence in the workplace. And I think similar to when you implement a new safety management system in an organization that hasn't had one, or you start to make some changes, you should see an increase in reporting. And that is actually a healthy sign. So the fact that we're seeing more of the mental health claims and the violence isn't necessarily from what I've seen in the research, a red flag as much as that's always been out there. It's been there, and people haven't reported it or put in claims. But now that we're educating and folks are becoming more aware of what constitutes violence, harassment, and those types of things, we will see more claims. So what that does do is bring it to the forefront and allow us to manage it better. And so we're going to continue working on that. Another item, we were asked by industry to separate the fatalities based on one being occupational disease or non-occupational disease. So why that's important is because the majority of our fatalities and the highest fatality rate that we have in the province is from asbestos exposure, and those numbers have actually been increasing. However, the way that you manage an occupational disease or asbestos that is maybe an exposure that happened 25 years ago, or when someone has a cardiac incident on site, something like that, compared to a traumatic injury or a car accident or something where a person is injured by a falling piece of equipment or or what have you, those are different. So we want to make sure that the industry is clear. So the occupational diseases are 21 of the 39 fatalities we had in 2022. Non-occupational make up 18 of those, so we're about half. So I'm going to get into the details of the strategy that we're going to be doing for the next 5 years. And this really is the focus of the majority of the work that my team will be doing in the prevention department at WCB. This is how labor will align a lot of their inspections and a lot of their work. And it is the cornerstone, the keystone of everything that we're going to be doing. So when I come to talk to you, or we have a meeting, or we discuss things, you're going to hear me say Fatality and Serious Injury Strategy, or the FSIS. And I'm going to say that over and over again, to the point where you're probably going to be like, Jonathan, I know what that is. Great. That's the goal. We want you to know what that is. And it is very appreciative that we have the SCSA allow us to come out to these types of events and present, because we want to ensure that the entire province is aware of this. So when we look at the main areas, when we look at the data and we look at some of the feedback from our partners, we selected 3 areas of focus for this serious injury fatality strategy. Those are healthcare. Again, healthcare does have the highest number of serious injuries in the province, and they have for quite a while. And they are one of the largest employers, and they do have a lot of unique risks: ergonomics, violence, even occupational disease. It is a focus. So we're going to be working, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, very closely with the healthcare organizations, both the SHA and other groups like homes and youth areas and so forth. Transportation, again, transportation does see quite a few incidents. No surprise, we have motor vehicle issues there by the nature of the business. This one is a little bit where some of those transportation industries are federally regulated, some are under provincial jurisdiction. So we will still work with those that are federally regulated. The difference being that our labor partners won't be involved maybe as much in the inspection process. That would be done by the federal government. And then finally, the construction industry is part of that. And we've seen that approximately 51% of fatalities were through occupational diseases that came through. So again, we talk about asbestos exposures, and there are other occupational diseases that are more prevalent in the construction industry that we'll be looking into and ensuring that everyone is aware of, and hopefully supporting a lot of those activities. As well, some of the risks that we see in construction aren't any surprises to you, but falls from heights and from the same surfaces are common. There are ergonomic issues with lifting materials. We still have a lot of we're a big province with few people, so we travel, we drive, we go between sites. We get up early in the morning. We're at the site by 5 o'clock, and we're working all day. It's construction season, and when construction season is here, there's lots of overtime opportunity, and people get fatigued. So there's a lot of different elements that come into that group. So those are the 3 industries that we'll be focusing on and working with. And these are the 7 key hazards that we identified through the strategy development. We've already talked about motor vehicle accidents. That's probably no surprise to anyone. Asbestos, again, is still our leading cause of fatality. And while we are seeing a shift a bit in the demographic of those that are coming to or being reported as asbestos fatalities, and we shouldn't see any new materials coming into the province that have asbestos. We have a lot of older buildings, a lot of renovations, a lot of opportunities for exposure. And the key here is just to maintain and ensure that those working with asbestos are clear on the hazards and are protected at all times. And then falls from heights, falls from the same surfaces. No surprise there, I'm sure, for this industry. Ergonomics, again, healthcare has a lot of ergonomic injuries, as well as construction, manufacturing, anything where you can potentially lift something. Or it could be repetitive motion, whether it's in healthcare or others. Machinery, again, focusing on guarding and protecting people from those rotations. When we do have a serious injury that's related to machinery, they're usually quite traumatic, right? Getting caught in a piece of equipment. There's also, even though some of the agriculture industry isn't covered through WCB, there's still a lot of information and support that can go in that direction as well. And then, as I mentioned, violence and mental health are two areas that we need to focus on. Violence is increasing in terms of claims, and we're seeing increase in psychological claims in all industries, and that's going to increase. And I think there's one side of that story that, again, the increase in violence incidents and reporting and claims in mental health means that we are more aware of these hazards and that we are reporting them and talking about them. And that's the expectation, is that we will see an increase in those, but that doesn't mean we're not working toward reducing them and reducing the durations that those cause. So I'll just go through this quickly. We have, again, Labor and WCB work together on this. We're going to try to improve the capacity and education and driving some of this training that we've done at WorkSafe that we took over from the ministry 10, 15 years ago. We're trying to create different ways for people to meet their occupational level 1, 2, and supervisor requirements, as well as that frees up our time to spend more time one-on-one with employers that need our support. Again, we're going to continue our targeted communications with these areas. You'll see the awareness campaigns coming from WorkSafe to be very aligned with this fatality strategy. We want to engage and support and work with different researchers in Saskatchewan across the country to help solve some of these problems. So if we do have an issue, we want to bring someone in. If we do have a problem we don't know the answer to, we want to be able to provide support for that research to get done. Again, integrating mental health into the safety management systems of organizations is something that I think is really vital, and many of you are working on that as well, is where you can see a future, I think, where in the past, when I was in manufacturing particularly, it was occupational safety and industrial hygiene. Those were the two disciplines that we were focused on. In the future, I think the safety practitioners are going to be occupational safety, industrial hygiene, and psychological safety. So anyone who considers themselves an OSIH expert, you're probably going to get a couple more letters on the end of your name, or that will be what the need will be going forward as we continue. So again, I talked a little bit about compliance. The focus from Labor, and I won't speak for them, but is really to align with the strategy and put their resources, just like us, in the places that need it the most to drive down those serious injuries. So when we look at the strategy, there's sort of three components to that. The partnership in safety and compliance, that's our priority employer program, or our partnerships with individual companies, where we bring them in, we talk with Labor, we kind of work out a plan and try to help reduce. We've also got some exciting work with external organizations to look at serious injury reduction planning and how we do a better job of predicting those for an organization. That will come later on in the strategy. Of course, our prevention and learning stream, doing more consulting with companies on serious injuries, different types of hazard assessment processes, investigations, doing a lot of the work that our safety associations do as well with their membership. We want to be able to do that for anyone who doesn't have a safety association with them, or anyone who needs additional support or what have you. And then compliance, again, Labor continues to adjust their compliance models to target serious injuries. And one of the most exciting changes, and I think, and that we have when it comes to fatalities and serious injuries strategy here, and Emery or Amber or Kelly, just give me a note if I'm running late on time. I think I've still got a bit. Is the way that we're going to approach this. So we are implementing learning collaboratives and community of practices. And the focus of this is to bring people together that maybe don't know how to solve a problem, but they know they have a problem. A good example would be slips, trips, and falls in construction industry. That has been prevalent in my entire career, and I'm sure has been there, forever. We have lots of hazards, and there always seems to be a discussion about How do we stop people from falling? Well, we may not know the best answer, or someone does know the best answer, but they haven't shared it. So what we want to do is bring those people together, collect the data, both on the WCB side, on the labor side, on all different sides that you can find. And from that data, we want to identify, what is the main risk? What is the root cause of this situation? We may have to refine that. And then we want to come up with a solution. And what we want to do with that solution is test it. So we'll have a smaller group of people go out and test it, report back. And once we've determined that, hey, this solution is working, we want to disseminate that across the entire province, not just within the industry. We've been working very closely with a consultant to develop our framework for this. So this, if you're involved, if you do become involved or are interested in what a learning collaborative is, this is the structure that we're using. Now, it looks maybe a little bit daunting, but actually what we've done is we've separated the training that's required to implement this type of project into 12 sessions. So essentially what happens is we form our learning collaborative. They meet, they do about half an hour of training, and then they do the work. So we talk about strategy. Let's talk about strategy. Let's do some strategy work. And they continue to do that in 12 module sessions. And then as they've got that training, they work and they go out into the field and they do some of those things and bring it back. These learning collaboratives could go on for years, and we're in the process of establishing them for those key target areas as well as for those key hazards. My slide's a little crooked there, I apologize. But right now, as we speak, and we've got a few of these starting or in the planning process, we have healthcare working. We've got two collaborators kind of working there, one focused on violence and one on ergonomics, which are the two higher risks there. So we're trying to find people to bring together, bring in experts, go through this process and come up with some solutions. In transportation, we actually did kick off in April our motor vehicle collision learning collaborative with some folks from industry, folks from SGI, from different government organizations. And we're going to be looking at how do we reduce those serious injuries as a result of motor vehicle crashes in the province. And then this one is I guess maybe a little bit, I'm a little bit biased, but we actually have just launched in April a community of practice with the construction industry around mental health. So with our partners at Merit Contractor Association, many of you are familiar with, and several companies, including RNF Ventures that Keith works with, who spoke earlier. We're coming together, and we started that on April 11th, and we're going to be looking at implementing our psychological health and safety roadmap that we've been developing for a few years. And this roadmap is a guide to how to improve psychological health and safety in your workplace. So we're learning about the 13 factors that were identified by the Mental Health Commission of Canada. We're going to be looking at our gaps, conducting analyses, doing surveys of our workforce in those three companies, and then collaborating and working on ways that we can make changes. We're going to develop an action plan. And from that action plan, we're going to work at slowly improving and changing, making those changes to align with the CSA standard around mental health. And as we complete those actions, we'll kind of add more and continue going. So we've just started this with 3 organizations in the construction industry, and we're going to be working on that for the remainder of the year and into 2024. And again, the exciting part for me is once we've figured out we've tested this process and seen some results, we're going to share that with the rest of the construction industry and the rest of the province, because the process, regardless of industry, will be the same in terms of what do you do to get ready and what are the things that you need to focus on and what is the information you need in that. So it's an experiment and we're testing it out, and we really appreciate our partners at Merit and others to be willing to experiment and try this out and implement this in the field for the first time. But I think we're going to see some exciting actions come out of it that are going to result in a safer workplace, both in construction and other organizations. So finally, I'm pretty much done here, but in terms of future opportunities for those of you that are in the construction industry that might be interested in participating in a learning collaborative or getting into the development of actions related to the strategy, again, we do see potential learning collaborative opportunity for fatality or for falls in the construction industry. I think this is something that we continue to hear about. Again, ergonomics, we are working with healthcare, but some of that information might be available or we might be able to test some things out in construction. Of course, asbestos is still going to be something we're working on. We have launched our training standard for asbestos, and we are in the process of completing our first accreditation with one organization and a few others that have kind of testing out this process. So again, creating a standard for asbestos awareness training for workers so that we can ensure that people that are doing the asbestos abatement have that basic knowledge to keep themselves safe. And we don't see, in 25 years, the same kind of claims that we're seeing now as a result of exposure. So lots of opportunity. The best way to engage with, engage and say, hey, I'm interested. I want to get involved somehow. We do have obviously all of our information on the site, and our group has done a really good job of putting together a really informative site. It has all the worker stories that I talked about, has the whole strategy on there. And you'll find this little button here, get involved. That'll get into our WorkSafe inquiry line. You're also welcome to always contact myself, or if you're familiar with your account manager, or you want to discuss that with anyone at the prevention department, please don't hesitate to contact. And we're always looking for people to try and test out new things, or we can just have a chat about some of the things that we can help you with. So with that, I really do appreciate the time to speak with you and share this exciting strategy. It's going to be a lot of hard but exciting and very interesting work. And I think that when we look back, at least for me, my goal would be at our team is to look back in 5 years and say, can you imagine we had 2,400 serious injuries every year, and now we're down to this many? Because every single one of those injuries is a suffering for an individual, for their family, for their coworkers, and we want to prevent that from happening. So thank you once again, SCSA, and for everyone. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to do my best to answer. If I can't, we can always connect outside of this presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. I just wanted to mention that we're having a little bit of a problem with our comments getting up there. So please, if you have your questions, keep trying. We're going to get to them. But we do have one right now from Ed, which is, what can construction companies do to identify effective leading indicators in an SIF framework?
I'm not quite sure if you're talking leading indicators or precursors for serious injuries, Ed, but there's a few things. There is actually a quite effective paper out there by the Construction Safety Resource Alliance, which we're a member of, and I know the SCSA is familiar with. Some of the board members are members of that group as well, and they have published a paper on their site talking about looking at leading indicators that are directly related to SIFs, and I can share that with you as well. When it comes to some of the metrics that we're going to be tracking for this, it's going to be pretty specific to the lagging results of the different hazards that we have on there. When it comes to precursors and SIF identification prior to their occurrence, we actually do have a project right now with the National Research Council and the Campbell Institute, which we're also members of in the US. And we're going to be working over the course of the next year with them and an individual company to develop a similar kind of roadmap or procedure that will help companies dive into their data better and look at their injuries and try to identify those types of injuries before they occur. It's not completely different from doing really effective incident investigation. So when we're getting down into the root cause of our serious injuries, or even those near misses that have a high potential for serious injury, we're finding that information. It's a matter of coming up with a more systematic and maybe adaptable approach so that we're able to support employers with that in the future. Not sure if that answers your question, Ed, but it's the best I can do.
And we have another one here from Jenna. She asks, what drives the emphasis on serious injuries instead of frequency of injuries? Oh,
that's a good question. So the drive to serious injuries is twofold. One is of course, the suffering that occurs. So when we talk about a serious injury, we're talking about something that takes someone out of the work for 50 or more days, is going to permanently damage them, is going to kill them, and is going to cause serious damage to themselves and to their family. If we look at it from a cost perspective, about 12% of our claims that come into WCB are serious injuries by the definition that I spoke of before, but they account for 80% of the cost. So not only are we focusing on serious injuries because we want to reduce that suffering, but because it will have a significant impact on employer premiums and medical costs for the province. So it's sort of an exciting trade-off or byproduct of focusing on SIFs is if we can reduce those and reduce the suffering and the damage caused by them, we're also going to see a massive economic impact, both for the individual organization and for the province and for the healthcare system. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and here's one from Heidi. Do you have any ideas about how safety professionals of the future should be trained? And as an HR professional,
you're asking me to be a sage. I will be the safety sage. No, I don't have any crystal ball, but as I mentioned in the presentation, what I've seen in my career is we start off by doing a really good job of learning physical safety, the typical hazards like falls, confined space, those types of things. And some of the best training you can get for that is from the SCSA. In fact, that's where I started my career and was trained on those types of things. And then when we get a little bit further down our career, we learn more about industrial hygiene and occupational diseases. And I think that's one area that we continue to need to learn more of, because most safety professionals understand, things like asbestos, maybe silica, maybe dust. There's all kinds of other elements of industrial hygiene that I think we need to, get a little better at. And by we, I mean, as a culture of safety professionals. And there are experts, right? Industrial hygiene. So even knowing enough to bring someone in that can help you understand that is important. And then I do really feel, based on what we're seeing with the data, as well as just, the common understanding that 1 out of 4 Canadians suffers with mental health, psychological health and safety is going to be the biggest and most important sort of new thing that we deal with in our generation of workers. I think we can all look back on serious injuries that have occurred in our workplace. And if we take some of the information we know now about psychological safety and think about those previous injuries, I bet we're going to see, wow, that person was really suffering, not only from that injury, but from like the mental health component of it. And so what we see right now in our claims is only strictly psychological claims coming in, like trauma, like a first responder going to a site and experiencing trauma, or a post-traumatic stress, or something related to harassment and violence. Those are direct psychological claims. We're going to be seeing a lot of secondary and tertiary ones coming in, that where someone has had a physical injury or they've been off work for a long time, and now that's turned into a psychological claim. So as a safety professional, and as a business owner or an employer, I think the focus on psychological safety, the sooner we can get at that, the better off everyone's going to be, and the less impact it's going to have on our workforce as well as on our economy.
And one more here from Carrie. He asks, bodily reaction and exertion has the highest percentage of claims as well as serious claims. Are these categories that show where specifically these injuries occur? Lifting, pushing, pulling, office-based? Yeah,
that's a really good question, Carrie. I don't have that data available to me right now, but we certainly can break it down. So if, for example, we're working with an employer like any employer, and we see that they have X number of exertion claims, we can go and look and take a little bit more look at the detail of what are caused. I wouldn't know. I know that, like in some industries, for example, in healthcare, the majority of ergonomic injuries are a result of moving patients. So TLR is transfer lifting and repositioning, and that's where we would focus with that industry. When it comes to construction industry, I don't have the data on me, but that's something that I think we could certainly look at, and would be interesting to see. And with any industry, right, there's going to be some patterns. Sometimes, I've had in my own career dealing with some of these. They're very specific to the tasks. And in manufacturing, there was, an ergonomic issue with that was very hand specific, and it was repetitive motion situation. And then in the same site, there was something that had to do with pushing and not lifting. So, yeah, I think that's not the best answer, but we do, I think, have a little bit of ability to drill down, but I don't have that data on me right now.
All right. Thank you very much, Jonathan. That was a very informative session. We really appreciate you joining us this morning.
Thank you. And it was great to see you, to present to you all. And again, don't hesitate to reach out. And I'm looking forward to talking with others in the future. Thanks again, SCSA.
Thank you.